So welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are doing one of our very elusive videos where we revisit a game that we've already played. We don't do that very often.
Because we have so many new games we have to try out.
I think we've maybe done it like twice.
Yeah.
So, this is great. So we're looking at Pericles from GMT Games, designed by Mark Herman.
An absolutely amazing game.
Yes.
In so many ways.
If you want to turn the video off now, that's all you need to know.
That's the review. Thank you for watching.
Love the game. So this was published in 2017, and we played it in 2017.
And let's go back in time to 2017, Grant and Alexander. We lived in the same town.
Yeah.
About 3 miles apart, which was glorious.
I was a student at college, working nights at a pharmacy.
Yes. So we very rarely played. You want to know the honest truth.
We played on like
Friday afternoons.
Friday afternoon, because you'd get off early, and it was before my shift started. And
so we had about 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours.
Like Combat Commander.
Yeah, that was most of what we did.
And then we'd play on Saturday morning, whilst my wife was at work, before I was waiting for my Saturday shifts.
Or we did Wednesdays as well.
Sometimes, yeah. That's how Wargame Wednesdays.
Wargames Wednesday started there. It wasn't just alliteration. It was
that was during my first stint at Walgreens there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So anyway, a look back at us then. We didn't know diddly poo about diddly poo.
No.
We were brand new wargamers. I mean, we had played wargames, but not the depth and breadth of these.
Yeah, we've experienced a lot in the last 5 years. So what I will tell you is...
It's been 7 years.
Since 2017?
Yeah, it's like...
That's 5 years. It's 2020.
Well, since we started in 2016. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes.
But,
yeah.
But,
Come a long way.
This game, we played and reviewed it. Like, I mean, it arrived and we played it almost immediately, I feel. Like, we played it that same year, and we played it just 2-player, which there's a system for that. It was okay. It was a lot, because you're basically managing 2 factions in the game.
Yes.
And it was very intense. It was a great experience, and in preparation for this, I went back and watched that entire review, and let me tell you, it holds up very well.
Which is interesting.
And I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
So, if you want to learn how the game plays with all the components,
because you look at the board there,
we
right?
shot the whole board there and went through everything, and I'll be honest, it was a lot more lucid than I was expecting it to be, rewatching it 5 years later.
Did we put more time into the games then because we didn't have as many?
So, yes and no.
That's a weird question, but it's not a bad question.
The thing with that game is that if you watch the review, we played 1 turn of that game.
Right.
And it took us 5 hours. Because
that's not uncommon even now sometimes,
but that
frankly.
that was at least an hour and a half reading the rules.
Because we literally opened it up
and
read it and started playing together, learning as we went.
Which the playbook says don't do that. The playbook has learn these little bite-sized parts of the game, and then you sew it all together. Yeah, we went just whole hog because that's just what we did. So, but the things that we talked about were like, oh yeah,
spot on.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, and the same thing. I looked at a couple pieces I wrote on it because at that time we were still writing a lot of the blog. We had really just started videos. And I thought, oh, yeah, I actually sound like I understood the game pretty well. Like, I talked about the debating part, how the strategos works, and the cards work, and the brain trust, and your king cards. And then I think on the other side, I talked about how to translate that onto the board itself. So I also was impressed. Oh, we actually sounded kind of like we knew what we were talking about. Which is interesting.
The impetus to make this video was that I'm like, oh man, we played a 4-player game of this at WBC 2022.
Yes.
And we've been wanting to do this
for a long time.
Years.
In fact, the apocryphal part, and it's actually happened, it's not apocryphal. Mark offered to play Pericles with us like 3 years ago, but I wanted to play Fire in the Lake and Fall of Saigon.
Fall of Saigon expansion.
So we said, oh no, Mark, we're not playing that. We're going to play Fall of Saigon.
Which we did, and that was great.
It was awesome.
But more for us for putting this off further.
Yeah, right. But now I want to, like, the next time we see him, we're going to play Pericles.
And that's in
4-player.
writing.
Yeah.
But, so it was a game that I had remembered really liking, but we'd only played it 2-player, and, like, you want to play this 4-player. I'm going to say it straight up.
And because the 2-player dynamic is like you're fighting against yourself. And it's hard to understand that and keep it in your mind and make it work right, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
Because the core of this game is that there's 2 factions in the Athenian side, and there's 2 factions in the Spartan side. And you're playing the Peloponnesian War, and not only does your side have to win it, but your faction within that has to have the most honor at the end of that too.
Very challenging.
So in Churchill, where there's 3 players, and we're all debating an issue, and you win the issue if it's on your track, in this one, the Athenians don't debate with the Spartans. We're at war with those bastards.
We're not talking to them.
No. I'm the aristocrats, you're the demagogues. We're debating between us as to how to conduct the war, which is a very cool dynamic. But when you play it 2-player, I play one side of the Athenians, and I play one side of the Spartans.
It's very interesting. So you're working against yourself.
And I think it's a total score of both of your factions at the end, I believe. So it was a lot. It was a lot to manage in my brain, and it was intense.
Especially,
but
we did it, but especially as new wargamers, I thought it was a lot. Because you got to remember, this is the 2nd volume in the Great Statesman series from GMT Games. The first volume is Churchill. We love Churchill.
Love it.
We have played Churchill multiple times, and we still play Churchill. We played Churchill 4 months ago at Buckeye Game Fest.
And it's a World War II game. I feel like Churchill
a little more comfortable.
Yeah,
it's in our
slightly more transparent.
Our wheelhouse.
This was because I remember.
Different.
Oh, we could do the debating.
Yeah.
And then I got to resolving the war, and it was
how do I do this?
I don't even know what to do.
Right.
Because I don't really know all that much about the Peloponnesian War back then. I don't know much now, but I also.
I think we've learned more than we used to know for sure.
So now
and
I
understand better.
Some of that. Yeah. But this was like, hey, conduct this war, and it was like I don't know what they did, so I don't know maybe what I should do or not do. So it was a big kind of a hurdle to get over. But being much more experienced now, having the 4 players, it was so much easier to do.
Well, we sat down at WBC. It was me, you, Mike Heckman, our friend from St. Louis that we've played with both at his house, our in-laws' houses, right?
Yep.
Which was kind of weird, but we wanted them to get murdered if Mike and Nate turned out to be psychopaths.
Psychos, they'd murder our in-laws and not us.
Please don't ever tell John and Deirdre that.
Oh, well, it's on the internet now.
Well, but that wasn't the plan, but I actually kind of laugh about that. I laugh about that because I'm like, we unleashed these 2 guys on them, and we didn't know them from Adam. But they're great guys, and we now know who they are.
Yes.
Love to play games with them. So anyway, it was Mike and then a gentleman from Kent.
In England,
In England.
Called Pete.
And
we played on the same side, so it was the English side against...
When you say we...
Me and Pete.
You and Pete were on the same side, not...
And we were the Athenians.
Yeah. And we were the barbaric Spartans.
Yep.
Trying to dominate with our cool units.
There's something there. No.
Yeah, right. Well, it's more my play style, I would think.
But it was such a fun experience. We played for probably 4 hours.
It was about 4.5, 5 hours.
And
we played was it a 3-turn scenario?
So we played the first Peloponnesian War scenario, which goes to I think it's a maximum of 5 turns.
Okay.
And it ended at 3. The war
because we had met the yes, because of the we would have played for another 2 turns probably had we been able to not bring that to bear.
Yeah, and the time was also.
Yeah, we were running out of time because we had some other event that we were going to play.
But it was so good. I felt like, we still reference the rules a good amount.
No doubt, especially getting started again.
Yeah.
Because I think we were remembering and misremembering.
Turn 1 was still like,
a little bit of a challenge.
But then by turns 2 and 3, it was like, let's go.
Yep.
And we were churning through it. The combat itself system.
It's very, very simple, I think.
Yeah. And seemed very, very understandable.
Yeah.
in our previous review, there's me bitching about the play aid saying, oh, this isn't very good or not very understandable.
I think it's all right there.
Yeah, it's pictorial and I'm a moron.
Yeah, it's all right there.
So don't listen to old me back then.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I wanted to play that out, like old us and 2017 us.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think this game was so much more clear and
Yes.
understandable that we played it the second time. And I think that we want to play it again because I think it's going to come into even more focus. We're going to better understand it.
Like Churchill, this will become a mainstay in the cycle of games that we take to cons and play.
Because you can play 4 players.
It can hold a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's fun and engaging. And
interesting.
It doesn't... It's not that scary. When you see it on a table, I've got some cards, I've got some wooden pieces, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
Right? That's different
Stunning.
from like an old Hex Encounter war game from the 1980s. So some people turn their nose up at that.
Sometimes. But this people were rubbernecking as they were walking by, which is always fun.
Which is one of those things where a lot of people really like it, or a lot of people are very jealous that you are finally getting to play it.
Yeah.
Because it's a big 4-player game, and some people struggle to get that kind of people together. We only ever we do it at cons. Is the most time we do that.
Well, and it's funny because we're always looking for that next game to take to the cons. We played Angola also. We'll shoot a video on that.
That's coming later.
But it was a multiplayer war game that we can sit down with three or four people and play and enjoy and have an interesting experience. Pericles is exactly that.
Yes.
It is made for that. It is a beautiful system. It was funny because we also tweeted out pictures as we were, and everybody was like, oh, it really is an amazing game. And we're like, okay, yeah, we absolutely remember how amazing it is and relearned that.
And I felt like I could finally appreciate it. Because I really enjoyed it in 2017 when we did the 2-player. I'm like, I know that there's a lot of stuff that's really great here, and I enjoyed what we did. But like, I still felt like I was missing that last step of the big 4-player, really understanding it, getting through more than just one turn as well.
Putting the pieces together and seeing how they play out, not only in the assembly, right, amongst your faction, and then debating those issues and getting them, but then how you put those into play in the war phase. It's so very cool. The diplomacy tokens, the league issues, the treachery that the Athenians can dastardly throw out. Very, very cool, by the way.
And then I felt also more than I do in Churchill, because the war part of it is a bit more open-ended than Churchill.
It's a little more sandbox than Churchill is.
What I feel like that does is that the assembly informs what you do in the war, and the war really informs your next debate.
Yes, that's a very good description.
You do that a little bit in Churchill, but it's a much greater extent where the two parts of the game really play with each other a lot more. And I thought we got to really see that, and that was such a great revelation of the game to me as well.
The other thing I really liked and really saw how it played out from when we just played the 2-player versus the 4-player was the concept of the strategos tokens.
Yes.
And I know I'm saying that wrong. It's strategos, right?
I think so.
Or is it strategos?
Well,
I'm a moron.
I don't speak
I'm not Greek.
So sorry.
But how you earn those, right, as you debate in the assembly, how important those are to what you're doing.
And how limited.
And how limited they are. Some of the issues, like, is it the games?
The games is what got you honor.
What was the one that got the strategos? The ostracism?
That also got you honor. One of them did.
I'm trying to remember. We should have shot the video when we.
But a lot of the cards is how you'd get those.
Well, that's the main way you get the 5. But there's ways to get addition in addition to what is put on the strategy board. That's what I was trying to remember. But you have to understand that because those pieces fuel how well you can do the war tokens and the diplomacy token and the league tokens on the board itself.
Yeah.
So it's a really unique and interconnected mechanic that I think you've got to understand. The better you understand, the better you're going to be at the war. And I think I learned because Mike dominated me in the assembly. It was like every time we had an issue, I thought, oh, I can get this card. He had a card that gave him one more point, and he would beat me by 1 point. I'm like, how in the heck is he doing this? Now, you always get some strategos because
if you play the matching...
If you play the matching...
But you're heavily incentivized to do that at the first card,
right,
so you get something.
But you're not locked out. You're always going to get something. You're not going to get as much as if you do the other, but it is fascinating. It's like a resource management game in that way. And those resources are not like money and soldiers. It's the influence that you have in the theater of war and how you use that.
Strategos are your leaders and their influence, right?
Right.
And the part of it that I think is so cool about that is that it's because you will get like all the strategos. There's 5 of them available kind of each turn,
right?
But as a base, those will all be collected by your side. It's not that those won't be available, it's that you might not be in charge of
your
them.
faction. I was the Eripontids, Mike was the Aegeid. He kept getting all those. So I'm like, okay, we can still use those to destroy the Athenians, but I'm not using them and I'm not getting the benefit from it. So that's the balance, right?
Yeah, and the way that you divvy up the one issues and how you put them out, the person whose color they are is still going to resolve them, but I might be able to influence where they go on the board, so they have to resolve them in that area where I think that it should be done.
That's a very fascinating mechanic
and
as well.
It's that whole the fracturing of your command structure might make your war effort less efficient.
Yes,
I think about Empire of the Sun and your inter-service rivalry. It feels a little bit like that, but
a very similar concept.
Really play that out.
Yeah.
And I think that aspect of it, again, in a 4-player game, you really get the real depth of that part of it as well. And then so you say to yourself, if I've only got 2 and you've only got 3, and you're resolving a battle, or you can only commit 2 or 3, that player's got 5 because they won them all. So do you ask yourself, do I just sack all of the Strategos tokens and let you have them all, so that one person can max bid?
Yep.
Oh. Very interesting.
And we had that discussion, Mike and I, because we were on the same side. And I think ultimately by the 3rd assembly, we were playing our cards a little differently, not to dominate each other, but to more equitably divide up that Strategos so that we could use it to do the things we needed to on the board. Because ultimately the game boils down to, it really is an area control game, right?
A large portion of your points will come from
You're trying to control these different colonies here in Greece, and you've got to have those strategos to be able to do that. We were struggling a bit. The Spartans are mighty. They're very good in the land war, and I think every game we ever play,
well, yeah, it's
historical,
be,
right?
Yeah.
They were better combat. I'm not going to go into it, but we talked about at the game table, we were talking about 300, right? The old famous, Athenian, what's your profession? And they say like, I'm a potter, sir, or I'm a sheepherd, right? No, but in my mind, maybe. So, and then the Spartans say, he doesn't even have to say much. He's like, what's your profession? They're like, because they're all soldiers, right?
Yes.
And he was like, I brought more soldiers. In my bread, I brought more soldiers than you, sir. No, I brought more soldiers than you did, right? And that's how the Spartans were. The Athenians, a little more naval focused.
Yeah.
You're trying to build a greater navy. Their naval pieces were worth more in battles. So you got to play off those strengths, and you have to understand
very simply asymmetric. And the way that the combats are done, it's very much here's my amount of pieces.
Yeah.
Here's your amount of pieces. Here's my combat strength and yours.
And you lose this many pieces.
And because you have less, you lose this based on my force composition. I lose this based on your force composition as well.
And back to that, so very simple mechanic in how combat is. But if you have those strategos and you throw a couple more of those in there, boy, you can destroy a base. A league base or what's the Athenian allies called?
There's also league. It's the Peloponnesian League and the other league that I forget what it's called.
Yeah, sorry, we're showing our ignorance of the Peloponnesian War in history. Mark's probably embarrassed that he even knows us.
The yellow ones and the white ones.
The yellow and the white dudes. But if you can throw those strategos in, kind of as extra addition to the combats, man, you can wipe them off out of these colonies.
And you have to do that to control
Right.
the space to score the points off of it.
Because if there is a piece lingering in there, you don't control it.
Nope, it's
so
contested.
that ended up biting the Spartans in our game, because we had 2 or 3 colonies like that where we dominated you. We didn't dominate you enough.
There was a little bit hanging on because we'd had the more Strategos
Yes.
tokens than you, and you just can't do that final coup de grace.
So very fascinating.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand that intermingling of how those mechanics work together to do the game well and to be effective. And that's why I want to play it again, because I think now, oh my gosh, I'm going to know way more how I'm going to execute those things and use my Strategos properly. It was also fun because Mike and I kind of duped him. And maybe he wouldn't admit to that, but he actually did admit to that. I was kind of duping him because I was starting to win the elements that gave me more honor on the board. He did catch on at the very end and kind of stopped that, but that was another cool mechanic within the mechanic of the game.
You can do all the military ones. I'll just have the games. And
I'm
I'll have the
and ostracism, and I scored a bunch of honor, and I think he was like, oh crap, you really closed that gap.
And almost all of that is done on a pendulum. I
Yes.
gain 3, you lose 3.
Yep.
The swings in
Very
some of those
important.
are huge.
So that's another kind of an intermingling of the two factions and some interplay, and
And so
that's what's
do you fight
fascinating
over those
about
2 issues and then no military stuff gets resolved?
But you got to do military, right? So it's a dance. It is literally a
And it's glorious.
dance, and you're on the knife edge of a blade, and you've got to do all these things, and you got to do them well, or you can't win the game.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in our game, the Athenians won.
Yes.
Right.
And it was the aristocrats. I won.
Right.
Very much by accident.
Right. Not necessarily by accident. We had kind of forgotten some elements.
Oh, I didn't know how influential the things that I had done were.
Right.
Because I'd won the games. I had a really good last debate.
Yes.
We'd settled the war issue so that the peace treaty was signed whilst you guys were in the lead.
Yes.
And then...
Which I would have never let that happen.
Yes.
Right.
So
I'm not sure you can stop it, but...
Oh, you can.
You can. You're right.
It's
right.
just... It's kind of difficult to do.
It's hard.
But, so... I then gained a bunch of honor because I'd won our debate, so
Yep.
I kind of gained 3, and Pete lost 3. I think I had the game, so I got an extra 3 from that, and then we scored all of that, all the area control part of it,
Right.
and it just ballooned,
Yes.
and we overtook, and it was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
okay, that was intense.
So that was an example of, we played an up to 5 turn scenario, the first Peloponnesian War. It would have been fantastic had we set it all back up and then played either the next scenario or gone back, because I think it would have been, I know it would have been completely different.
I would have done it differently.
We would have taken different actions, executed different things, chosen different issues.
And the war probably wouldn't have ended. Because in the single war scenarios, you only end the war when you're winning it.
Yeah, right.
And there's no reason to stop that.
Until...
If you're playing the big campaign, you might want to get out of the war so that you can kind of stem the tide, because then there's no more
fighting.
Can't change.
Yeah.
And then some of, like, the games then changes what it does. It doesn't just give you the honor. And so you might, so that you can regroup and kind of refocus, get yourself sorted out.
Yeah.
And then you declare another war.
Right.
But in that, I don't think you'd end the war voluntarily, because if you're winning, the losing side's never going to agree to it.
Right.
Because in that short scenario of 5 turns, there's no reason you would. Whereas in the big campaign, there might be incentive.
I think ultimately we did, because we had to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because I think we could have played for another couple of hours. And
I would
really
happily have done all 5 turns. Happily.
had even more fun.
Because
even more of a unique experience.
Just brilliant.
What I would say about this game is I love the Great Statesman series.
Yeah, I would agree.
It is a fascinating, the concept of the debating the issues that then get ultimately played out in the theaters of war.
It's perfect.
It's fascinating.
I love that, because you see that it's the 2 sides of war.
Yeah.
Here's my actual combat, which is, a bit beefier than it is in Churchill, but it's the politics
Yep.
and the logistics and all the stuff that goes into that to make that happen.
It's
Most war games don't have that.
It's a war within the war, but it's the war that drives the war. And it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
So well done. Bravo, Mark. We love this game. And I didn't think that I didn't love it.
No,
we had a
but-
fantastic experience in our relatively inexperienced war game mind. And
In 2-player.
yeah,
People would ask, and they're like, "Oh, I love Pericles," and it was like, "Yeah, I really liked it too," but I never felt like I could join the party in
Now
the
I
same
think
way. Now I'm like, yes,
we finally
This is
punched
it.
our ticket and understand.
I get it.
Yeah.
This is it.
This is a game that I want to play at every convention we go to.
Yeah, this and Fire in the Lake. They're going everywhere, right?
And we did play Fire in the Lake at the same convention, which is hilarious because it's an amazing game. Also by Mark Herman and Volker Runke. But this is a game I absolutely want to play a lot more.
Yep.
Multiplayer, the way it's intended, so that it can be prosecuted in the way that I think Mark saw it playing out on the board. I love this game.
Yeah, this is a huge thing.
Absolutely love this game. This game would definitely be on my must-play list of games for anybody who is interested in history. And frankly, on my game of top 10 games of all time, this has got to be higher. I don't think I have it on my list, but it's going to be higher on that list.
Yeah, this is
for sure.
The experience that we had playing it ticked all the boxes of what I enjoy in playing big war games.
Yeah.
You've got the actual tactical aspect of it that's reasonably easy to resolve, but also very interesting. You've got the table talk aspect of it with your compatriots discussing strategy, which I always like as well.
Yep.
But then you got the back and forth of card play, little different bits and pieces that just are so choice.
Yeah.
This is everything that I like in a game.
And we didn't even really talk much about the outside, like the Persian Empire here. I mean, you've got so much of
little bits of chrome kicking around.
Yeah, and it's like, wow. And I could see why that is so important. I can also see now why so many of the other aspects are important, like the Sicilian granary, and you lose those, you're done.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yes.
And I think the Athenians have, is it only one?
So I think they start off with just the one at the beginning of the very first scenario, the first turn.
In the Hellespont, right?
Because the East Med is closed off.
So in that scenario specifically, man, as the Spartans, we might have pushed a hell of a lot harder to try to get up in here.
And we'd fortified that with stuff
pretty good.
It's very slow to get to, because it's hard to kind of make a lot of jumps and progress.
I guess the reason I bring that up is there's so many other elements that play out in this game. You got to play this 50 times to really get every aspect of it.
And like you said, this will be one that we continue to play.
Yes.
This will... I'm so happy we finally did, because this will be in a regular rotation.
Yeah. I had a blast playing the full 4-player game the way I think it was intended. I think I already said that earlier.
Agreed.
I had a blast with Mike as my ally, who was my opponent as well, because I'm trying to beat him. Fascinating, the different interaction. And it was also interesting because I was watching you and Pete. There was also some tug of war going on with the two of you in a very different way.
Yeah,
in a very different
I felt
way.
like we were very amicable in the way that we were divvying things up.
Mike and I were
some of it was not out of choice because I had a bad hand one time.
Right.
But it was like we'd agree to do certain things.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what this game's about.
And I love any kind of a war game that has negotiation in it. I love it.
Absolutely.
That's always a big thing for me.
The other thing, and we didn't even cover it, there's plague in this game. That has vastly different outcomes and restrictions. And
it changes what your leader can and can't do in a certain phase.
Right?
A bunch of those different events in that Aristophanes deck.
There are hostages that you take from different combats that you...
That's how you force people into ending the war.
Yep.
You can. So if you decisively, and it's very difficult to do, destroy someone in a combat that they should win.
Yep.
So if Sparta defeats Athens in a naval battle, they get a hostage token, and you play the hostage token, and it forces the war issue to go onto their track.
Yep.
And then we put it on ours, because
Yep.
usually you're then like in a winning position.
Yep.
And they have to keep it in a certain space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're forced into signing the treaty. But the more you do that, the
Yep.
more they have to like agree to do all these other things, and they're wasting time on this little war issue whilst you're still going hard on your military stuff.
It's just
so great.
Well, and the other issues that I thought, oh, these are so cool. The games, the ostracism, the oracle, I don't know.
We had our Athenian citizenship where we
Which is unique to the Athenians.
Turned a
Yep.
city-state into a kind of turned them Athenian. Little neat bits and pieces
So
like
interesting. There's just so much uniqueness here. That I brought up that Athenian treachery because that was, wow, you guys were using that really to great effect, because what it does is it adds to your combat strength in that theater, right?
As well as you're using treachery plus a card pull to try and take over enemy bases.
Yeah.
Like you could
Just
do a lot
so-
of things with
Yep.
a number of the elements of the game, and
Yep.
and even if you don't, my card pull didn't fail. Well, I've still got a +2 in combat from that thing.
Yeah,
it's great.
and you're going to keep building on that. And it was interesting because Mike and I think initially we were like, we were poo-pooing that.
Yeah,
right?
no,
Because we
big
had
strength in 'em.
such a military advantage. But then I saw it leveling the playing field and then ultimately taking a base away. And I'm like, damn. And then we started focusing more on that. And that was so cool. So the depth of this game is so fascinating.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I think it's much deeper than Churchill.
Absolutely.
Not on a knock on Churchill, but like
Love
there is
Churchill. We'll always love Churchill.
a
Yep.
lot of bits to this as well, which I really, really like.
So I'm so glad that we took the opportunity to play it again. I'm so glad that I lugged that game across country to make sure we could play it.
And how many cons have we taken this to and it's not happened?
Several.
And so,
But we made it happen this time
And-
at WBC.
and now I think we
Fantastic.
will continue to do so.
There's no doubt. Like you said, Fire in the Lake, Pericles. We also played Angola, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's also got to
was
be a
great,
game
too.
that you lug along, because it's a full 4-player game, and it is fantastic.
That was a long one too.
So, Mark, I just absolutely cemented again why Mark Herman is such a great designer. This game's fascinating. I love it.
Yes.
Love it.
Big 4-player war game. It's Ancients. It's Peloponnesian War. Thank you for sticking around with us whilst we ramble about this game again.
Well, and also thank you. If you've watched our other Pericles video, watch it again, because you're going to get a different perspective and a different view, because you're going to see the board as well.
Yeah, the board's all in there and all how it plays.
Yeah.
Some of the mechanics, but you also get to see my old house, and I wasn't.
And hearing the whirring.
It was shot on my phone.
Oh my gosh.
It's
Hilarious.
the widest shot of all time. I'm not wearing shoes, and you can just see my bare feet under the table.
You're not wearing shoes now, but
I
you
didn't
can't
have.
see
I
them.
didn't have any facial hair. I was like 50 pounds lighter. You had a little goatee, not the whole beard.
Absolutely. Yep. I don't know.
And-
Such a different time.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back to those two naive idiots and say, stop what you're doing.
That is a window to the past, but I'll be honest. The content, I was very surprised at how much it holds up. So check that out as well. Appreciate you very much for tuning in.
Well, I'm
also.
sorry. Check this game out.
Oh,
Absolutely.
this is the business.
It's probably back on the P500 because they're probably trying to do a second.
I mean, you if not, you got to pick it up.
Yeah, you got to. Anyway,
It's
awesome.
wonderful.
Game. Awesome.
Pericles from
Love it.
GMT. Appreciate you tuning in. I'm Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.